Is this the future of home theater? Let's discuss. Hello and welcome, my friends. My name is Elon Osborne and I like to talk about movies, audio, and music. And today I want to go over spatial audio in a home theater setting. So let me start off by telling you a little story. So it's a weekend. I wanted to watch something as I was eating my lunch. And my girls were home, obviously, and the show that I wanted to catch up on had some adult language. So I had honestly never tried this before, but I knew that I could connect my AirPods Pro to my Apple TV 4K and listen to it that way. But when I popped them in my ears, it was really weird. It still sounded like the sound was coming from the TV. So I even asked my daughters, like, hey, whoa, can you hear this? Can you hear what's going on the TV? They said no. So already that kind of tripped me out. Because, and you may already know this, but if you turn your head when spatial audio is active, it'll still sound like it's coming from the TV. Because if you actually turn your head and you keep your head there, like maybe somebody's trying to communicate something with you, the audio will then shift as if this is the front now. Something you might want to be aware of. Like if you turn your head, you want to quickly turn back to straight ahead, or else the entire sound stage will shift with you, and that's not good. But I ended up watching an entire episode of the thing that I wanted to watch, even with my girls right there playing in the living room. And they couldn't hear a thing. So then it got me thinking, there is some crazy DSP going on right now. For those two little earbuds to be able to process audio in such a way where direction actually matters, and I am in fact placed within a space, well, what do movies sound like? Because, well, I should have mentioned this already, but the show that I was watching when my girls were present was a documentary. So it's not like it was some like grandiose Dolby Atmos presentation. No, it was interviews and music every once in a while, so nothing spectacular. So I also have an Apple TV 4K in this shed theater. So then I came down to the shed and decided, well, what do movies sound like? Is it going to sound like things are coming from above if it is a Dolby Atmos mix? Is it going to sound like it's behind me? How spatial can spatial audio get? So I just watched a bunch of particular scenes that I like. So I started off with Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise. I started off with the first battlefield scene where everybody's dropping out of the ship because the ship is literally being torn apart. And I gotta tell you, I was definitely in the middle of the action. Despite the audio being just fed to me through two tiny little earbuds, there were some things moving all around, sweeping, bullets whizzing by, sand exploding and falling, impacts from ships crashing into the ground. So before I move on, let me backtrack a little bit, because since it is on an Apple TV 4K, I am not actually able to do this experiment watching things on a 4K Blu-ray player. But the majority of my 4K Blu-ray collection, I also had the digital code, and I have that on my Vudu account. So all of the movies that I'm going to mention, I did access through the Vudu app on my Apple TV 4K. So now that I established that we do definitely have some amazing side, front, and rear effects happening even with two little earbuds, I wanted to test out some scenes that I knew had some really good height effects. So then I went to midway. So there is a scene where a Japanese officer is speaking to his cohorts, and everybody then realizes that there are planes coming up overhead. And in a traditional home theater system, you can hear them in the height channels coming from overhead. So in that scene, as everyone is looking up, it did in fact sound like the planes were flying overhead, even with these two little earbuds in. I wouldn't say it was as pronounced as having actual speakers above me, but it really was cool that the signal processing happening inside of those two little earbuds made it seem like something was definitely above my head. Almost like a sensation of something high up. And I know in Midway there are some shots where there are planes making a descent towards the enemy, and those move very well behind me in my surround backs if I'm listening to it on the traditional system. So those same shots through the earbuds sounded okay. I wouldn't say it was dead on as if it sounded like it was behind me, but there definitely was some movement, that's for sure. And as far as having a sense of space, yes, it was there. But the actual signal processing to make it seem like there was actual movement behind my head was lacking a little bit. Next, I watched Blade Runner 2049, where the main character is going to the orphanage. He gets shot down, and then once he's down, then missiles start raining from high above from a satellite. People are being blown to bits. Once again, the actual sense of space around me was awesome. When his flying car gets struck by lightning and poof, everything just loses power, and all you can hear is the wind and the rain from outside pelting the windshield. Oh man, just in general, I love situations like that where there's a lot of sound going on and all of a sudden it just cuts out. I love quick contrasts of audio like that. Moments like that just kind of take your breath away, you know? As you may have seen from my comparison of Game of Thrones on HBO versus 4K Blu-ray, the Battle of the Bastards is now one of my go-tos for testing out home theater situations. So I popped that in. Once again, that shot where Jon Snow, it's like a video game. He's fighting people as if you're a third-person character playing this video game. And once again, these earbuds put me in the middle of the action. When Jon Snow is getting trampled on and gasping for air and everybody's going over him, it just felt so claustrophobic. And lastly, as a cherry on top, I watched the first 15-20 minutes or so of Gravity. I don't actually own the Diamond Luxe Blu-ray version of Gravity because it's no longer in print, and people who are selling it for way too much money. But it is one of the very first Atmos mixes available for home video. So with it being the first, it is also one of the best because it was so experimental. They really took the time to put you in the middle of the action. So a while back, I did download that straight from Apple TV because it still does, in fact, have the Atmos mix. So I think I paid $10 for it at the time, as opposed to whatever ridiculous amount people are trying to sell the Diamond Luxe version today. And even though that mix is done so well, compared to the other stuff I was watching on Vudu, since this was directly just on my hard drive within the Apple TV 4K, this one did have a little funkiness going on. As I mentioned before with Midway, there was a bit lacking with the ability to actually hear something from behind my head. But with Gravity, my AirPods Pro actually made it sound like the voices were coming from literally behind my head, even though the dialogue was actually supposed to be coming from the front. It was kind of a trip because I don't know if maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, or maybe my ears at that point were fatiguing and I needed to take them out and give them a break for a little bit, but it was kind of strange. But regardless, it still sounded amazing, and you know, them talking to Houston and the people on the space shuttle and George Clooney's voice going all around, it was still incredibly immersive and it sounded really cool. So just to remind myself of how it actually should sound, I then went back to the beginning of Gravity, took my earbuds out and listened to it just on my traditional home theater system. And okay, that dialogue that kind of sounded like it was coming from behind my head should have been in front of me. So as I was watching all these things through my Apple TV 4K, the thought occurred to me, well, what about on my phone? Because spatial audio also works on my phone, am I going to get the same result? There is a difference. For whatever reason, don't ask me why, don't ask me the science behind it, don't ask me what it is about this versus an Apple TV 4K. What I was hearing out of my phone was nothing like I was hearing through Apple TV 4K. So just word to the wise, if you're wanting to do something like this or experiment with this or just see how it sounds with your spatial audio compatible device, you're not going to get the same result with your phone. The audio processing capabilities are just better with the Apple TV 4K, and it showed. Digital signal processor. So the main idea behind this whole experiment was that, I mean, we are binaural creatures. We have two ears. We perceive distance and direction, loudness, just through two holes in our ears that is then interpreted by our brains. If a sound hits this ear just milliseconds before this ear, our brain then interprets that as, oh, it's coming from this direction, because our ears picked up that distortion in the air molecules sooner on this side than it did this side. So then we know it's coming from that direction, right? So with extremely high quality audio processing, shouldn't we be able to get the same result with just headphones? Being able to trick our brains into setting certain delays on certain sounds to make it seem like it's coming from one direction versus another? Are earbuds or headphones the future of home theater? If you're wanting to do this same experiment and check it out, just so you know, spatial audio only works by connecting one headset at a time. You can connect multiple headsets to an Apple TV 4K, for example, but since you're now dealing with two heads that might be turning at different times, spatial audio disconnects. So it is kind of a bummer that to do this experiment yourselves, you can only do it by yourself. You can't exactly have family movie night and just have everyone wearing AirPods and have the same effect. But if you're all on your own and you want to check it out, do it. But even today, apps like Apple Logic Pro X does give you the ability to mix music binaurally. Not just regular stereo, you can choose to monitor all the sounds coming through your headphones to be binaural. So now you're not just limited to left and right like a stereo file, you can go above and to the side and behind and all around this dome. But not only left, right, up, down, but farther away and closer. In theory, something can sound like it's right here or 5 feet over there. Now, is that what the actual result ends up being? Yeah, not so much. Spatial audio in general is still relatively in its infancy. I personally have listened to Dolby Atmos music and am not really impressed because I'd say about 90% of everything that is in Dolby Atmos just sounds like crap. Vocals just sound off and too distant. And just the overall punchiness and body to a bass guitar and an electric guitar, kick drum, snare, just kind of sound weaker with the spatial audio version. But one thing that spatial audio is sorely lacking in, honestly because it's impossible to reproduce with tiny little drivers inside earbuds or even over-the-ear headphones, bass extension. We all know that cinematic bass, you feel it. You don't just hear it, it rumbles in your chest, rumbles the walls, rumbles your couch. The wavelengths of bass frequencies are so long that in order for them to get so long and so low, you have to have a driver that is large. True cinematic bass is going to require a driver that is at least 12 inches in diameter. I know your traditional cubed subwoofer starts at 8 inches and goes up, and that's totally cool. Those are your more budget-friendly versions of getting at least some sort of cinematic bass effect when you're watching TV and movies. But to really get those deep notes down to 18, 15, 10 hertz, it is scientifically impossible to reach those depths without something at least 12 inches in diameter. So even though my earbuds definitely gave me a sense of immersion as far as space is concerned, it was sorely lacking in bass extension. It honestly sounded like all the bass had just been sucked out. So perhaps maybe that is the future of home theater, some sort of 2-channel binaural system that works in tandem with one or more subwoofers. So that way you get the spatial information and processing, as well as those deep rumbles that only a subwoofer can provide. Right now, do I prefer to have a traditional home theater setup where I've got speakers all around me in a confined space? Of course, but I am very stoked for the future of spatial audio. Have I also tested out Dolby Atmos for headphones? Yes. Was I impressed? Not really. I got way better results just using these AirPods than I ever did listening to just regular headphones with Dolby Atmos for headphones active. So while we still got a ways to go, I am excited to see what's gonna happen.
And there you have it.
Thank you for joining me on this little experiment that I had. What are your thoughts on spatial audio? Have you listened to much Dolby Atmos music? What do you think about Dolby Atmos for headphones? One thing I'd like to experiment more with is Dolby Atmos for headphones with gaming. I haven't tested that out with gaming at all, so I might be missing out a lot in that regard. So if you are a gamer who's experienced Dolby Atmos with headphones, let me know in the comments below. As always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV and movies on your earbuds or headphones or home theater system. Experience them. And of course, always be listening.